I want to introduce a line of research I stumbled on called the parasite stress theory. This theory proposes causal links to pathogens and phenotype expression, as well as broader cultural trends resulting from widespread pathogenic parasites. Everything from homicide rates, group collectivism, and mate selection. The way it works is this. A pathogen enters the body, let's say from a young age, and this leads to a variety of developmental problems. The ability to absorb nutrients is lessened as the parasite steals those nutrients. It also inflames the body and weakens the immune system. The parasite can spread to many different parts of the body and cause different issues from bone growth, digestion issues, eyesight, muscle development, etc. Like any organism, the pathogen requires certain conditions to grow and reproduce. It likes certain nutrients and hates others. It releases toxins which influence what the host ultimately does and puts in its body, trending toward food that feeds the parasite. Parasite load diminishes the chances for the optimal phenotype expression of an individual. Basically, your genetics can only replicate to the best of their ability. In a vacuum, they will always succeed. When parasites and pathogens are introduced, the burden of the immune system is overwhelmed, and this stress causes asymmetry and other development issues. Do this over several generations across a wide population, and you've got trends. What you might call cultural trends. What we see today are craniums that are disproportionate. People's teeth are overcrowding smaller jaws. The nose isn't lining up, which causes a reduced ability to breathe, forcing mouth breathing, which exacerbates the jaw issues. Distance between mouth and the nose is off. The nose and the eyes are off, and the eyes to the forehead are slightly off in some, while others have much greater disproportions abnormal to their phenotype. On top of this is asymmetry between the left and the right side of the body. What's also seen is waist-hip ratio fluctuating based on parasite load, which goes into the mate selection part of the theory. Parasite stress theory also goes into the way a group treats itself and outsiders. They refer to it as collectivists and individualists. A group of people considered to have a low parasite load will be more communal, which does result in less tolerance from those outside the collective, as it is thought to be a defense from novel pathogens being introduced from outsiders. Individualist societies have increased parasite load, and so they don't make distinctions based on any groupings. The cultural norm fluctuates, and they are encouraged to break from it in individualist societies. I have a couple problems with the parasite stress theory. However, it is mainly due to their lack of fully considering the role of the microbiome. The microbiome has been almost undisputably attributed to the existence and function of the psyche, behaviors, mood, appetites, beliefs, health, and interests. Essentially, the microbiome is what gives you our qualities, which we consider to make us human, all of your personality traits. Understanding that we are more of an ecosystem with an active microbiome will change how we see something like the parasite stress theory, which misses a couple points. So let's make up a scenario. We have a tribe of 100 people. They live a certain way and believe certain things. One day they discover a new food source. Unknown to them, this food source has a certain type of bacteria. This bacteria colonizes their gut, and over several generations, the tribe now has slightly altered their belief system and their values and cultural practices. This word will be key in understanding this, since it is conveniently the same word for two related ideas, and that is culture, as in a society and its beliefs and trends, and culture as in a culture of microorganisms. A culture of microorganisms in a group of individuals will influence the individuals to behave in certain context, hence the cultural trend. Let's take that tribe of 100 and say that half of the tribe gets a disease. Some pathogen was introduced to the community and only half of the tribe is safe. Let's say the half of the tribe that ate the most of that new food with the bacteria are able to fight off the disease. So you have 50 members with an improved microbiome suited for this new pathogen and 50 members who got infected. The 50 sick members all survive. This pathogen turned out to be pretty mild. However, it was a bacteria and it colonized the microbiome of the 50 it was able to infect. Fast forward several generations and the tribe is clearly splitting. The 50 with the new pathogenic bacteria are now craving a food source that is imported from miles away. A falling out occurs between the two sects of the tribe. The original 50 stayed put and the pathogenic tribe decided to start a new tribe miles away. The microbiome of the 50 that traveled are now very much different. They are in a different environment and consume slightly different food. What they don't know is the bacteria they got from when they were sick has been slowly eroding their immune system. Birth defects are becoming common, and the tribe can't get enough of this new food source, which ultimately feeds the bacteria until it becomes too great of a burden on the body. But this pathogenic bacteria infecting their microbiome is defeated by the bacteria that is in the microbiome of the original 50 tribe members who didn't get sick. So the sick tribe suddenly finds themselves justifying a war against their neighbor tribe. For some seemingly inexplicable reason, they hate the tribe. Their microbiome is aggravated by the microbiome of the original 50. It is a long war and food becomes scarce. They destroy the original 50 tribe members, but the sick tribe was exposed long enough through all the battles and having to rely on the local food source that original bacteria eradicated the pathogenic bacteria that made them so hateful and aggressive in the first place. They decide to settle here, and their corrected microbiome is now stronger than even the original 50 that they defeated. Hopefully that example was easy to follow because it gets infinitely more complex from here. We are dealing with populations in the hundreds of millions, microbiomes which are composed of over 10,000 different species and an innumerable amount of possible pathogens. The parasite stress theory vastly underestimates the role of the microbiome beyond just mate choices and asymmetry and group inclusivity. Suppose a parasite infects a group of people, and suppose that parasite is naturally more communal, and this group of people become fiercely aggressive at trying to convince others of their lifestyle and belief system. And not all parasites are necessarily bad. In some sense, the word parasite can be improper in understanding that all animals are constructed of their microbiome. We can also consider the microbiome is ultimately the link towards spirituality. Change the microbiome and the religious or spiritual beliefs change with it. I have argued for this in the past that evolution occurs on the microbial level. Where a pathogen may lead to complications in the population now, it could end up benefiting that same population's offspring. Don't get me wrong, there are clear pathogens that seek to completely take over the host and lead it to propagate, such as many species of worms, bacteria, and fungus. We also don't know the full extent of something like microplastics in our culture. Slight attitude changes resulting from plastics in the blood and lungs or even the brain could lead to operation damages, which generates a host of behavioral issues. I don't know that any evidence exists that suggests most parasites are hive mind. Though it wouldn't surprise me if some are, I do think that their needs are shared, the way any organism has its preferred diet and lifestyle. If 10 million people are infected with the same parasite, you'll likely see common behaviors, preferences, and lifestyles or beliefs within that microbiome demographic, which in modern society can mean people from all over the world with all kinds of backgrounds. The human body is a city. All the people who work in the city are the microorganisms. Maybe that is a way to understand our consciousness and behaviors. Or you can say that the human is the hardware, while the microbiome is the software and operating system, with the genes as the binary code. It's how the software and operating system perform that allows binary code to be used and the hardware to function. It's true that all parts are useful, but the genetic code means nothing without a body to obtain nutrients like protein and amino acids. Likewise, the body could never live without its microbiome. The microbiome is absolutely essential for a living organism of our size and complexity. The microbes are the only part of the equation that can exist separate from the other two. That is why I emphasize it so much, and why I believe it to be the source of the idea of the ego, the soul, or the persona of the human, the idea of the self. It is inherently incomplete, but there exists a trend of epidemics within an empire or civilization and wars. The reason I say it's incomplete is because up until recent history, our record of epidemics can only be studied through extreme evidence of such an epidemic occurring. Unlike a war, it is harder to measure the state of the microbiome within a population existing 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, except when such obvious epidemics did take place. The point I am making is this trend can imaginably be much more lined up if only we knew the more subtle microbes at play behind these wars. Still, let's compare some of the data. From BC 430 to 426 was the plague of Athens, which caused the death of nearly 100,000 people. This occurred during the second year of the Peloponnesian War. Many laws changed, and in general the culture changed after this plague, which was thought to be some kind of typhoid. In AD 165 to 180, the Antonine Plague, which is said to have been spread during the end of the Parthian Wars, or Rome's invasion of Mesopotamia. The death count was estimated at 5 to 10 million, roughly 10% of the population. In the same year the Parthian War ended, the Marcomannic Wars began, which was basically Rome against the Germanic tribes. I'm not going to go through every single war and disease, because I think you get the idea and I can cover that in another video. Now the first explanation is that simply these people find a reason to fight each other and they happen to bring back a novel disease to an unprepared immune system. The other way of looking at this, the one I am suggesting, considers that the microbes were playing a role in the background, you could say, of these civilizations. It was the cultural trends, as influenced by microorganisms, that led to the decisions of the people to act on something such as war. The insatiable greed, the endless corruption, the madness, inbreeding, perversions. Well, what causes these things in the first place? We know in perfect conditions it is unlikely for a human to desire such harm to another human. Or in other related issues, things like bestiality and child abuse. What causes someone to be a glutton or a society to randomly decide it's better than one group of people or another, causing them into extremes like slavery and wars? It also provides us with an interesting way of looking at the arrival of Columbus in the Americas. A tragic but clear example of a direct correlation, I argue, for one group of humans and their microbiome meeting with another. That it was microorganisms that killed most of the native populations should be evidence of this correlation. That the European nobility at the time were wildly unhealthy, and the decisions they made during this time reflect such poor and corrupted, possibly worm-infested microbiomes that their inexplicable desire to enslave and ravage the entire New World is put into perspective. When one group of humans meet another, there will be interactions with the microbiome and therefore the psyche. These wars, or conquests, are also underpinned by religious ideology. But let's step away from the large-scale stuff for now. What happens when you live with someone or even pets over a long period of time? You begin to communicate with them in your own way. You take on their habits and they take on your habits. The way you think and act becomes more and more similar. I believe this to be directly related to the sharing of the microbiome that inevitably occurs with close proximity. The sharing of meals is the most communal activity of man, as it establishes similar microbiomes in all those who participate. Look no further than a student who brings their own lunch being treated differently by their peers than those that eat the school lunch. You could even say what causes particular people to be targets of abuse, animal attacks, or other tragedies. You could say it's random, but I think more likely there are microorganisms interacting with each other which could attract you to such danger, or that attracts someone to carry out that danger. In either situation, the pathogen wins and spreads. Or the way people treat their pets or even kids. Abuse goes hand in hand with sick living, and this abuse is carried by the pathogen, which leads to more cycles of that same abuse in others, spreading the pathogen and reinforcing its presence in the individual. What I also noticed is the comparisons people make with the fall of Rome and what people are saying is the decline of America. If I am right about the fall of Rome being from Candida, it's obvious that people would unconsciously recognize similar symptoms in Rome, as America is infested with the same type of problem, Candida. So of course the comparisons are obvious because the pathogen is similar. This is generally how medical diagnoses are performed, a recognition of symptoms to discover a source. So cultural trends are decided by the shared cultures of a population. Failure to follow the cultural trend and the community will ostracize you. As we are loaded with pesticides, preservatives, microplastics, micrometals, fluoridation, reduced nutrition, antibodies, recycled air, and so on, the burden or load of pathogens increases, and so does the lack of deworming. People will naturally seek to be more individualistic and break social norms as the parasite load increases. Within that individualism grows a community with few definable traits and beliefs, except that the beliefs should be decided by the individual. It becomes a mob mentality very quickly. The parasite will always influence its host to allow it to reproduce and thrive. I think most people are infected with pathogens. From my understanding, the few that seem to be the most rampant are a few species of worms, Borrelia, which is the bacteria that cause Lyme disease, Candida, and strains of black mold. You may even be able to find parallels toward political or economic or even religious beliefs and the pathogen that would lead to more extreme versions of those beliefs. In conclusion, you could say that we need a diverse microbiome, but the more diverse a microbiome, the more chances that a novel parasite will not infect a population at the same rate, meaning from that alone, divisions in the community will begin to fester. The parasite stress theory seems to add confirmation to my own conclusions that we should look from the microscopic out.